Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. It is me, by my lonesome, tonight as I record. You might be listening during the evening time or the daytime. You might be listening at 9 a.m. Sunday morning. But right now, as of recording, it is nighttime and it is late. And the past couple weeks, I mentioned that I'm by myself for this broadcast. The past couple weeks, I've had some guests on the show. I've had a few listeners reach out and say, hey, you should have some guests on the show sometime soon. And I had been planning on it. But anybody who's been following me for a while, I like to think of, this radio audience, and especially the podcast audience, as a family. And I let you know what's going on in my life. Reasonably, I do keep some things sacred. But there was a few months there where I don't think I had many guests on the show just because life was so lifey. I had a baby in October. Riker was born in late October. We brought him home on Halloween, which is kind of funny. Another kind of funny thing to think about, because it's just in my brain right now, it just popped into my head, is we brought baby Riker home in an electric vehicle in our 2017 Chevy Bolt EV. And I read a sentiment somewhere on Twitter the other day, I think from Engineering Explained, and Matt Farah had commented on that tweet. Matt Farah I had on the show a few shows ago. You should go back and check it out, geektherapyradio.com. Grab the podcast in your favorite podcast player. Just type in Geek Therapy Radio Podcast into your favorite podcast app. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. Anyway, Engineering Explained had mentioned, and I should try to get him on the show, that, their baby's being born right now, that all they will know, possibly, is electric vehicles. Now, of course, they're going to know of, this is my commentary now, of course, they're going to know of gasoline vehicles, for instance. My response to that tweet was that we brought my son Riker home in a 2017 Chevy Bolt EV pure electric vehicle, but my son is also going to learn to how to drive a 5-speed manual transmission so that he can drive my 1983 DeLorean. So just because that he's born into a world where perhaps all he'll know as daily drivers are EVs, at least my son is going to be kind of perhaps one of the last kind of dwindling generations that will know how to operate a gasoline vehicle, and even more dwindling, know how to work a clutch. I don't mean that as like such a source of pride. It's just kind of true. Not to get too sidetracked here, because I want to talk about the microphone that I'm talking into. I want to talk about the upgrades I've done to my solar panel setup. But not to get too sidetracked, it's just a theory that I have that every generation from here on out is going to be less technically minded and more kind of software minded, more programming minded. That doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad thing. It could be that in the future things, and this is kind of the trending where it's going, things are so irreparable by the end user that, and the circuits are so tightly integrated, and we see this happening with the continued shrinking of electronics, that it is no longer necessary, and it's also might be impossible to roll up your sleeves and get dirty to fix something. It could be possible that EVs in the future are so inaccessible by the driver. I mean, there's no oil to change, so to speak. There is some coolant to change here and there, but it's going to become even more tightly integrated that there's just nothing that you could do in your garage without highly specialized equipment. So this was kind of on that note, this is kind of a shocker to me, because I wasn't expecting it. He didn't reach out to me, and I'm not mad about it. I appreciate the exposure, but Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, included a clip of one of my videos in his recent video about the right to repair, where we're at in the right to repair legislature and laws trying to be passed. He included a clip of my video where I'm repairing an old Walkman. And how I found out about this was one of you listening tweeted at me, Anderson in South America. He tweeted at me and said, "Hey, this was crazy," or whatever. And I was like, I didn't realize what I was looking at. I saw his tweet and I kind of liked it. I was like, yeah, it's kind of, because I saw Geek Therapy Radio video in the little corner of the thumbnail and I wasn't thinking about it. I was like, wait, that's a Marquez Brownlee video. That's one of the top tech YouTubers in the entire planet. One of the top YouTubers, period, in the entire planet. He's like 14 or 15 million subscribers. And he used a good portion of a good long clip of my video and his video when he was talking about the state of the right to repair movement, which was really cool. And again, somebody had commented on that video, because I get notifications of comments when I check my YouTube back end. It says, "Here from the Marquez Brownlee video." And I was like, oh. And I was just thinking, okay, maybe they watched an MKBHD video and it kind of like recommended what to watch next based on their interest, and it may have brought them to my channel. No, it's because Marquez popped a clip in there. He didn't mention my channel by name or me by name. He just put the clip in there as B-roll while he was talking, which is kind of cool. I'm trying to stay on his radar. I'd love to have him on the show. I would love to have him collaborate with me or my day job or something like that, but we'll see. I've collabed with other big YouTubers before. 8-Bit Guy's a regular visitor on the show. LGR, Clint, Lazy Game Reviews, regular visitor. Colin from This Is Not Compute. I've had the Angry Video Game Nerd on a few times. So it's not out of the question that Marcus. I've had Austin Evans on the show a few years ago. So it's not out of the question that Marquez might do something with him with Geek Therapy Radio. That'd be awesome. And if he tweeted the link to the podcast, holy macaroni, that would be great for Geek Therapy Radio. Real quick, on the way out of this first segment here, especially for the podcast listeners, another buddy, Kenzo, thank you for reaching out and reminding me. The last guest I had on the show, Peter from Japan, we talked all about his DeLorean, and there was an earthquake during the interview. It's kind of cool. I did upload that video. It is actually, okay, technically, as I'm recording right now, it is rendering out of DaVinci Resolve as I speak. DaVinci Resolve Studio, by the way. I took the plunge, and I have the full version of the software, because I need it for work. So you can use a license on 2 computers. I'm using it on my Ryzen 9, Beast Mode 3090 editing rig, and I also have it on my MacBook Pro M1. Laptop, so that's cool. All right, in the next segment, I do want to talk about this microphone. It's a 70-year-old, at least, RCA 77DX microphone. Let's dig into it a little bit, not physically, but let's talk about it. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. By the way, that video of Peter from Tokyo, we recorded over Skype. I used OBS to record it and all that good stuff. It's uploaded to the YouTube channel. It's Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. And like anywhere else, when you type in Geek Therapy Radio into YouTube or into your favorite podcast app, just look for the red, white, and black color scheme. If it's not the red, white, and black color scheme or any combination thereof, it's not my brand of Geek Therapy Radio. I don't know if there was another network called like GT Radio or Geek Therapy, something like that. I was not affiliated with them. I'm not sure they're still around. Maybe they are. Hopefully they are. They did good work over there, but I was not affiliated with them. I had never talked to them. I think their color scheme was green included in there. That's not me. That's all I'm saying is if you search for Geek Therapy Radio in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube to watch the Peter from Japan DeLorean YouTube video, type in Geek Therapy Radio, look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's how you know it's me. Pluggerinos, geektherapyradio.com. That's the easiest way to contact me other than the email, which is just johnny@geektherapyradio.com. Geektherapyradio.com. It's the contact form right there on the front page there. It doesn't sign you up for any mailing list, doesn't add you to any list anywhere. It's just like it just sends me a message. My phone dings. It says you have a message on the website. Oh, and I go see. That's how Kenzo reached out to me and let me know about the video wasn't uploaded yet, and there was another issue with the website or the blog. The blog. I need to check on that because I'm not sure if the radio station still hosts my blog or the blog link is. I got to check on that. Kenzo, thank you. I have the best listeners in the world, literally the world. So many of you, the ones of you who reach out to me the most are my international listeners. I do have stateside listeners reaching out to me. I do have Houston-based listeners reach out to me, but I would say the most of you that reach out to me, you are international listeners. So thank you so much. That kind of boggles my mind, and I kind of wonder where you all came from as far as how you all found me. And I think it usually has to do with, they heard me on this does not compete with Colin, or they watched a LGR video, or I had LGR on my show, or the 8-Bit Guy or something like that, and they find out about me. So, and however you find out about me, thank you very much. All right. This microphone, I just want to talk about this microphone a little bit. It is the legendary RCA 77DX. I guarantee you, if you are listening to the radio show right now, if you're listening to the broadcast radio show of Geek Therapy Radio over the weekend here in KPRC 950 AM, I know for a freaking fact that there is nobody else in this iHeartRadio cluster using an RCA 77DX microphone. I mean, that's for obvious reasons. You know, the industry standard has changed. It's the Electro Voice RE20. It's technically the RE26ND. Is that right off the top of my head? Or RE27ND? I want to get one of those for my studio, but no. The microphone I use on Geek Therapy Radio, of all places, and it makes sense because this is Geek Therapy Radio, and I'm a very audio geeky guy. That is my background, is audio. I'm using the RCA 77DX. And if you're having a hard time picturing what the RCA 77DX looks like, I will, in the podcast, I'll use it as the thumbnail. But you can also think about, talk show hosts of the 90s and early 2000s. David Letterman. Think about David Letterman's desk. That microphone on his desk, the RCA 77DX looks like a giant pill capsule. Looks like a giant Tylenol kind of thing. And it's just a legendary microphone. Larry King had it on his desk for years. I don't think, especially, for a couple decades at least, the microphones were just on the desk for show. Johnny Carson would use the microphone. They would actually record into the microphone. It was actually used for interviewing because of the polar pattern of the microphone. Technically, the RCA 77DX, you can dial in. There's a physical barrier you can twist around in the back to turn it from an omnidirectional to unidirectional to bidirectional or figure eight or bipolar pattern. But that figure eight pattern, that bipolar pattern, was great for interviews because it meant Johnny Carson could ask a question, and then on the other side of the desk in the chair was the guest, and the microphone would be picking up both of them from both sides of the microphone. That's what the RCA 77DX was used for. It was used for other applications also, but mainly for broadcasting. So how did I get my hands on an RCA 77DX? If anybody out there is listening and knows microphones, they are incredibly expensive microphones. They are, I haven't mentioned this yet, they are ribbon microphones, and it's a 70-year-old ribbon microphone. So they are very delicate. I mean, this one survived. I'll get to that in a second. Ribbon microphones are delicate. Ribbon microphones, you don't see them used a lot. You don't hear them used a lot nowadays, not just because they're delicate, but I think a lot of sound equipment now, like the USB audio interfaces that most people use, like in bedroom studios, they don't have the preamp power. They don't have enough gain to twist on that knob to get a good level out of a ribbon microphone. And for the love of God, never ever run phantom power into a ribbon microphone. You will most likely destroy the ribbon element in there, which is thinner than a human hair, way thinner than a human hair. But a lot of USB audio interfaces, especially cheap ones, they don't have enough gain. And then when you do crank the gain high enough to get a good signal out of there, you get a lot of noise and hiss coming out of the cheap preamp. I have mine plugged into the Tascam US 20x20. It has enough gain. I have got the gain set to about 85 to 90% right now driving this microphone. And if you're listening to the podcast in high fidelity, it doesn't sound too bad, does it? Now, I have it quite EQ'd. And that was kind of part and parcel with what I was just saying. A lot of people don't use ribbon microphones for many reasons. And then when they do get their hands on a ribbon microphone, and then they do have an audio interface that can drive enough gain into it to get a good level out of it, it doesn't sound very good. It doesn't sound like what they're expecting. It sounds kind of muddy and dull and not very good. So here's the thing. Ribbon microphones take EQ like a boss. Do not be afraid. If you ever get your hands on a ribbon microphone, do not be afraid to go crazy with those EQ settings. So the next thing you're going to hear right now, I'm going to play a little a portion of this audio of my voiceover that is not EQ'd. This is not going to matter for AM radio. You're probably not going to hear much difference, but when you listen to the podcast, you definitely will hear a difference. So I'm going to change the EQ settings now. All right now you are listening to the RCA 77DX with no equalization, at least no EQ on the voiceover track. I do have some, like an audio maximizer for like a level maximizer on the master output of this session, but that's really not messing with the EQ much at all. And it doesn't matter because listen, you can hear what a difference it makes anyways. This is the un-EQ'd RCA 77 DX. Now let's go back to the EQ channel. So now you're listening to it with the EQ settings I have on here, and it's pretty darn aggressive. I've gone down to 80 hertz, in between 80 and 100 hertz, so the bass frequencies of my voice, and I have bumped it up by like 9 dB. 9 dB to bump the low end of my voice, and then I did a broad scoop from, I'd say, 400 or 500 hertz all the way to about 2000-ish hertz, a scoop with the Q setting, the bandwidth setting quite wide from, like I said, 500 or so to about 2000 hertz, and I have that scoop down about 4 to 5 decibels. And then in the high end at 12K, between like 10K and 12K, I've got it boosted by another, I think it's 8 or 9 decibels. 7, 8, or 9 decibels again. So it's scooped and it's punchy in the low end, and it got some air on the high end, and it doesn't sound half bad compared to un-EQ'd. And one more time, this is what it sounds like un-EQ'd. But here comes the bump, so I'm going to go back to EQ'd settings. That's the RCA 77DX microphone I'm using right now. I want to talk a little bit about its personal history in my family coming up. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberg. I'm having fun with this broadcast. I always have fun with this podcast/broadcast. Grab the podcast if you're just tuning in on the radio. Geek Therapy Radio in your favorite podcast player. Just type in Geek Therapy Radio into your favorite podcast player. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's how you know you've got my official brand of Geek Therapy Radio. So in the last segment or so, I've been talking about the microphone that I'm using to record and will use to record for the foreseeable future, at least these podcasts and broadcast. It is the venerable, legendary, gigantic Tylenol pill RCA 77DX. This microphone that I'm using is at least 70 years old. And I just spent the last segment kind of talking about the EQ settings that I use for, talking about ribbon mics in general, what they are and aren't used for, and that they generally take an EQ really well. The other thing, before I get onto the family history about ribbon microphones are still used a lot today in professional recording studios for instruments like woodwinds and brass. So saxophones, trumpets. A saxophone would be a woodwind, trumpet would be a brass. They have that very, very high mid harshness, mid high harshness, not high end, not mid range, but kind of the mid highs, that really grating harshness. And ribbon microphones naturally bring down that harshness. They tame that harshness. So a ribbon microphone almost completely un-EQ'd, is put on a blaring saxophone, for instance, sounds amazing. Some, to a lesser degree, some studios, depending on the player, depending on the song, depending on the style of music, depending on all that kind of stuff, will put a ribbon microphone on a guitar cabinet. For clean guitars, it sounds really good. As a secondary microphone, for distorted guitars, it can sound okay. So as a second microphone, that means, you'd have a Shure SM57 like right on the cone or right on the edge of the center of the cone or something like that. And then you'd have a ribbon microphone maybe halfway through on the cone, maybe off axis or something like that. I don't know. They are used to a lesser extent on guitar cabinets, but they're used all the time on upper mid-rangey, harsh brass and woodwind instruments. And sometimes there are singers that really have a harshness, they're really good singers and they have really good voice. I know because I work with one of them. They have an excellent voice, but there's a timbre right there at the upper mid, high mids that's just like, oh man. If you sing into a regular condenser microphone like a U67 or a TLM 103 or like a Neumann whatever, it's like, oh, you got to go into the EQ and like, especially for a recording through a very sensitive condenser microphone. But if you have a ribbon microphone on a singer like that, it's almost like you don't got to EQ at all. It takes that harshness out of the upper mids beautifully. So anyways, back to the family history of this microphone, this RCA 77 DX. This was my grandfather's microphone. My grandfather, who's also named John, he's passed away. He died when he was 96 or 97 years old. He used to work for RCA. And when he worked for RCA back in the 1950s, they came out with this microphone in the 1950s, and my grandfather got one. I don't know if he bought one himself. I would imagine that it was given to him as an employee or as a discount. I don't know how or why he got the microphone, but he worked at RCA at the time. This might be it's not a prototype. It's definitely not a prototype. This is a finished product. It might have been part of like a employee raffle. I have no idea. But my grandfather worked for RCA, and he got this microphone when he worked for RCA, and this was like the heyday of RCA. My father, one of his first jobs was working for RCA, pressing records. So my dad worked for RCA a little bit too. So anyways, my grandfather got the microphone. And so let's fast forward a little bit. My dad went to Vietnam. He came home from Vietnam, went to Emerson College to get his degree in journalism and communications. And let's fast forward to the 1980s, the early 1980s. My dad used this microphone, which had stayed in the family from the 50s to the 80s, so that's like 30 years. It's not too long. My dad used this microphone to run, to DJ for our radio station when we owned a radio station in San Antonio, Texas, and Bernie, Texas. It was KBRN. And I don't remember the call sign, and my dad lost a lot of money on that station because it turns out it's a romantic idea to own your own radio station, but you also have to be able to sell advertising. That's the way radio works. And my dad, anybody who's known my dad, was an excellent freaking broadcaster, but the Shark Tank side of my dad wasn't really there, so he wasn't very effective in selling it. I'm not sure if he hired a sales team to sell inventory on the airways for KBRN, but either way, I grew up in that radio station as a little baby, so I've grown up around this microphone. The radio station went under. My dad finally paid off that radio station at some point in the 90s. It cost as much as a house. I'm not going to give the exact figure, but it's 90s numbers, so inflation. It was a lot of money. It was a hit. It was a failed experiment, to say the least. But it was good times. We still have home videos and footage of KBRN going to county fairs and to parades and things like that. And It was a kind of a nice time. I don't think my dad regretted owning a radio station, other than the financial side of it. It kind of checked a big check off his bucket list of owning his own radio station. So my dad used this microphone at that radio station that we owned in the 1980s in Bernie, Texas, KBRN. Fast forward another... Well, so the microphone from that time, so I was a little boy, and this microphone had always been around. It wasn't in the radio station because we didn't own the radio station, but my dad always had it kind of in his man cave and would use it from time to time just to mess around with recording to a reel-to-reel or recording to cassette tape, recording a demo or recording whatever. He used to kind of tinker with stuff. The way that up in my room, I'm doing a broadcast now and a podcast. There's a purpose for what I'm using this microphone for, which is why I'm using the microphone, to keep it in the family. But growing up, it wasn't used professionally. So there was a few decades there where this microphone was just kind of sitting in storage, basically. And I had it. I whipped it out in the early 2000s. No. Yeah, mid to late 2000s. I found it and I plugged it into my Behringer mixer and I messed around with it for just a little bit, recording a little bit. But I discovered what I mentioned earlier, that ribbon microphones didn't really sound that good if you don't know what you're doing with them. And I didn't know what I was doing with it at that time. So I kind of put it away again and didn't think about it. Then my uncle, who was still in broadcasting and still records voiceovers and still records audiobooks and cartoon character voices and all sorts of stuff, he procured the microphone after my dad died, and I was all too happy, with letting him use it, because, yeah, you're still a broadcaster, Uncle Bill. Absolutely, take the microphone, put it to good use. So he did that, and he used it, and while he owned it, it is when I got this radio show. And since I got this radio show in 2017, I always thought, like, man, I can't wait for the day, like, maybe I can buy it from my Uncle Bill, or maybe I can borrow it or something like that. But I never brought it up. I just kind of thought to myself, maybe it'll be nice to use that RCA 77DX on my radio show, since I'm on the radio now. I'm carrying that flame for the family. So a few weeks ago, my Uncle Bill texted me out of the blue. I had never told Uncle Bill that I would like the microphone or like to use it one day. I never mentioned it to him. He just texted me out of the blue. He's like, hey, would you have a use for this RCA if I sent it to you? And I was like, dude, heck yeah. That's like miraculous that you're texting me this. Yes, please, for the love of God, I will pay for shipping. I'll do whatever you want. It's like, no, don't worry about that. So he's like, I'd just be happy to have it stay in the family and, still be used. So I was like, yes, absolutely, send it to me. I will use it day one. I'll open it up and I will use it. So that's how the microphone got back to my possession. Another interesting tidbit about this microphone to start wrapping up this segment. I asked Uncle Bill that if he knew any history of the microphone, and he basically said that his dad brought it home in the 1950s. It's been in the family since the 50s, and my dad used it. He used it. Now I'm using it. And my second question was, do you know if anything's been done to the microphone? Has this been modified or refurbished in any way? He said, nope, not to his knowledge. And for me personally, growing up with this microphone, I don't recall my dad ever having it serviced at all either. So as far as we know, you are listening to a 70-year-old unmodified ribbon microphone. So ribbons can be fragile. This one stood the test of time. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I just spent the last segment explaining in detail the family history of this microphone I'm using. If you're just joining us on the radio, it's the RCA 77DX. Just think about Larry King hunched over his desk. That's the microphone. It's a legend, and we've had it in my family since the microphone came out. It was brand new. My grandfather brought it home in the 1950s. When he worked for RCA. Long family history with this microphone. If you were just tuning into the broadcast and you want to hear that whole history again, grab the podcast. It is the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Just type in Geek Therapy Radio or Geek Therapy Radio podcast into your favorite podcast player and make sure you see the red, white, and black color scheme or any combination thereof, red, white, and black. That's how you know you've got my brand of Geek Therapy Radio. Somebody asked me the other day, I think it was an old classmate. Does anybody else get these emails from your class, from your high school, like your alma mater or whatever? Class reunion, 25 years or 20-year class reunion. What did it? I get it from Kingwood High School. That's where I graduated from in 2002. So I guess it is the 20-year reunion that's coming up, and part of that hurts. Part of that number hurts. 20. I've been out of high school for as long as it took me to get through high school. I don't like to think about that. But there's a class reunion coming up at Kingwood High School, class of 2002, 20-year reunion. And are you guys attending? Da, da, da. First of all, I didn't really know. I mean, I had lost by the time I graduated from Kingwood High School, I had gone to private school from 6th grade to 11th grade. So all of middle school and most of high school, I only went to Kingwood High School for my senior year. It's not like I knew a ton of people there. So if I went to the reunion, nobody would know there would be a few people who knew who I am. But it just kind of like, I feel like I would just kind of sit there. Hi. It would be making small talk with people that are just effectively strangers. Because here's the other thing. I know some of you might be listening, especially to the podcast. You might be from wherever you are in the world or other parts of the country. Kingwood High School was a small city. There was like a 1,500, like 11 to 1,500 kids or something like that in my graduating class alone. There was like 1,100 seniors that graduated. Not the entire school, just that one grade was over 1,000 people. So and this was before Facebook and before social media and it was even before my freaking space. It was barely during high-speed internet was coming out. I didn't even have actually I did have a cell phone. I got a cell phone, a Nokia 3310 or something. It was the black and white version when I was 18 years old in the year 2002. And it was not a smartphone. It was just a cellular telephone. That's when I graduated. There was no social media. It was just whoever you could store in your phone's, data bank. We had communicated. We had to call people, and it was T9 texting. There was no keyboards on phones. It was beep beep beep, deet deet, beep beep deep, beep beep beep. Like hacking through text like that. The T9 era. Oh my gosh. So, needless to say, there's no Facebook. I don't know a lot of people there. Maybe some people. Oh, that was gonna sound bad. Maybe some people know me, and I don't know them. That sounds like a terrible thing to say, and it's probably 100%, a million times not true at all. But I still feel like if I went to the reunion, that I just wouldn't know anybody and it would be very awkward. I kind of have this idea in my head, and because I think at one point Kingwood High School did reach out to me to do something like this. Hey, will you come speak to the students about being in broadcasting or something? But it was so long ago. It was kind of early on in my career, and I was like, I know as much about it as they do, really. I mean, I don't think I have enough of this under my belt to talk to the kids at a function about broadcasting or about this career or whatever. And you know what? If Kingwood High School, I would love for them to ask me again. And I think I would go. But here's the caveat, though. I have been in this, and I'm not going to get too sidetracked. Well, I will, but I do want to touch on my solar panel upgrades in a moment. But, okay, if Kingwood High School asked me back, they say, hey, you're 20 years out, you've established your career now, you have the radio show, and you're in broadcasting for going on 12 years now. Now you're the YouTube channel manager at the museum, and you still got the radio show, and you're doing all this broadcasting stuff. Will you come kind of talk about broadcasting in the year 2021 or the year 2022 or in the 21st century or whatever? I think I would say yes now, with 12 years under my belt. And the caveat is that I would be just straight up real with them. I would rip their ideas a new one, and hopefully their parents too, because I have seen how this sausage is made for the past 12 years, and it keeps me up at night. The amount of I will just say that you do not know even 1% of what you think you know if you get your information from loud voices coming through a speaker. I would say that 99.9% of your information that you think you know is true because a loud voice is yelling at the loudest coming through a speaker, that it is misinformed. You are woefully and shamefully misinformed about the world around you if you get your news from commentary. The incentive is not to be truthful or trustworthy. The incentive is to get you to the ad break. That's the reality of this business. It's to get you to hang on to every word emotionally so that you can't click away, you can't tune out, you stay to the ad break. That's what this business is. Your best interest is nowhere near a priority. It is not on the radar, on the scope of this business. Understand, by their own admission, you are listening to entertainers, not journalists. And sure as friggity frick, not doctors. So, listen to it. Have fun listening to it. Be entertained by it. I do it myself when I'm driving around. But just understand that only you guard your heart and your mind. You alone. What's coming out of your speaker is not looking out for that part of you. Only you can guard your heart and your mind. Just remind yourself when you get all fired up by what this person in the radio is saying, that it is just commentary designed to get you to hold on to the ad break, and that's fine. Just remember that it's entertainment. So, my solar panels. I had 195 watts. Now I am up to 780 watts. Basically, I got 3 more 195 watt panels. I've got my 60 amp charge controller. It's an MPPT charge controller. And the cherry on top that I just received mere hours before recording this broadcast and podcast, I just received my 200 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. I am all set, baby. I've got a 2,000 watt inverter, 4,000 watt peak, pure sine wave that I can attach to any of my 3 gas generators, my cars, including the DeLorean. And I can also attach to my EV, which its battery pack has days, if not weeks worth of power stored up in there. So I'm just so happy that I've got my solar rig all set up. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love, receiving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. GeekTherapyRadio.com for more information, or you can email me, Johnny@GeekTherapyRadio.com. Thank you so much for listening. Take care until next time. If you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just go to GeekTherapyRadio.com and let's talk.